Welcome. Sound test. Can you hear me? Great. Welcome to James's English class. I'm James. I'm doing a special session today, pop-up class. Requests are open. If you want to join me on the stage, please feel free to come on up. Come on up, Shafani, Skoogie, and anybody else. The topic I'm looking to talk about today is something near and dear to my heart. It's about offending people. Harm versus offense. And we're going to read a little bit from a very old book called On Liberty by John Stuart Mill. But really, I want to have a conversation about this topic, about the difference between hurting people and offending people, because I think it's very relevant. It comes up for me all the time, and I'm guessing it may interest you as well. So I'm going to put some links in the chat. Really just one link. I'm going to put the link to the book On Liberty. And I don't want to make this too, I don't want to start us off by making it too difficult, because this can get difficult, and the book is a difficult book. But I think the topic of harm and offense is something people can relate to easily. So even before we start reading the book, I'll pose these questions. What is harm? And what does it mean to be offended?
Can I say something short about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we notice that the subject in both is different. So the harm subject is the doer, or not the victim, but the perpetrator. But the offense or the offended is like the subject here is the victim. So I think the difference between both is that somebody can try to harm you, but it's up to you to be offended or not. And I don't know, maybe that's true, maybe not. What do you think, Mr. James?
I'll think about it. I don't know. There is something going on grammatically. James harmed Skoogie. James offended Skoogie. Seems pretty basic to me at first glance, but let's see.
About this.
What's that, Shafani?
Can I say something about this subject?
Yeah.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
I think the main difference between offense and harm is that harm implies there's damage being done, and offense is someone's feelings or sentiments are disturbed. And I think there's a deeper subject underneath this, which is how human tolerance has reduced over the years, where people also feel so sensitive and like their nerves are so exposed that when someone disturbs your sentiments, it almost gets conflated, gets mixed up with being damaged. So I think that's something I would like to bookmark.
Now, Shafani, Skugi, you're both very highly intelligent people, very advanced English speakers, native English speaker. Let's remember where we are. Let's remember that we're just starting. And let's also remember the context, because some people have been talking to me about this topic before, and other people who may just have shown up in the class are encountering this topic for the first time. So I don't want to dismiss what either of you are saying, but I want to just remember the context, because that's going to be essential for the group as a whole. And it may take some time before we can address or explore some of the nuances, and instead it might be helpful to just get some really straightforward, simple definitions or examples of these two ideas of harm and offense. What do you think?
Sense.
Welcome, baby. Is that your name?
Yes. Thank you.
So this may even be difficult to do, to have a simple definition of harm and offense. I'm not saying that it's easy. For those of you new to my class, I'll tell you I love to use ChatGPT, and I'm holding back just right now to see what comes up, to see if we can on our own come up with something. And if not, we can go to ChatGPT.
Skugi here. I think the verb to harm is different than the noun harm. To harm is to try to inflict damage upon somebody, and the harm is the damage in itself. To offend somebody or to be offended over something is to feel anger, to feel negative emotions like anger, disappointment, toward or to inflict these emotions on somebody.
Or to offend someone, that may be offense.
So is that all that offense is? Is it just bad feelings, irritation, discomfort, dislike, anger? Is that what offense is?
Technically, offense can mean attack, and depending on the context, generally speaking, it's an attack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it implies someone coming at you. So there's some opposition. I think there's an opposite force, and there may be a clash of opposite forces. I think that kind of conveys what an offense is. I think examples might help. Like, to harm someone might be, in very simple terms, you push someone and they fall down, okay, and they skin their knee, okay, you've harmed them. And then offense is, you say you're an idiot. That can hurt their feelings.
The danger of hosting classes where I choose the topic is we have yet to discover if this topic resonates with the group as a whole. I know that it resonates with a few people here. We'll see how it progresses. I want you to know, with all my classes, really, I use a certain principle, which is I'm open to discussion. And this is an English class. It's an English learning server. So I'm open to changing the topic. However, I want you to meet me halfway. If you want to change the topic, you'll need to listen and to make a request. You'll need to come in and show that you understand what we're talking about and ask, hey, I'd like to talk about something else. Is that okay? So I don't want people to feel restricted by the topic that I have proposed, but I do require a minimum amount of ability to participate and meet me where I am in hosting my classes, because people often ask me to propose topics, and I usually don't. So today is an exception. You're getting a chance to participate in a class where I'm choosing the topic, but it's not strictly this topic. I just want to make that clear. So Shafani, you're talking about some the usefulness of looking at examples. Pushing somebody down the stairs would be harm. Calling them an idiot would be offense. Sounds good to me. For a start, sounds good to me. Now we're gonna
I think,
go ahead.
let's just say, I think there's interest in the group. I think it's a very relatable subject, like how offended people get, especially on the internet, and how none of us want to be harmed, or we don't want to see others get harmed. I think it's a very relatable subject, and there's, I think, a little bit of interest in the chat also.
If people want to participate by using the chat, if I see some clear, relevant comments, I'll read them out. Let's give it a little bit of time to see if anybody has anything to say about it before we jump into the reading. Or shall we jump into the reading right away? Freyer says.
Yeah, let's read.
Freyer says, offense. You make a joke about someone's favorite movie. It wasn't meant to be rude, but they feel offended because they are very attached to it. The focus is on their feelings regardless of your intention. Harm. You spread a false rumor about someone, damaging their reputation, even if your intention was a harmless joke. It caused measurable harm to their relationship or career. The focus is on the outcome, regardless of whether you intended to cause harm. Anakin, welcome. Cassie says harm could be physical too. Absolutely. In fact, it's probably easier to see physical harm than it is to see emotional harm or emotional damage. Just Nay says harm involves causing actual damage or injury to someone who, while offense is about causing someone to feel upset, insulted, or annoyed. I'm going to give a little bit more context about why I chose this topic this morning. I host an English class by text, and there was some discussion where somebody was using bad words, curse words. I don't remember exactly what the curse words were, and I don't think it matters, but generally speaking, I don't like to censor so-called bad words. It doesn't offend me personally. At the same time, I recognize it can be a dangerous area to go into for anybody, but especially second language learners can pick up some of these words, use them, and not realize the effect that they have on other people and get themselves into trouble. So I'm partial to the idea that we want to be careful with so-called bad words. Personally, I have no problem. I don't get offended generally. But I can if they're directed at me. I'm not totally immune to being offended. If somebody is insulting me, at times I will feel hurt and even want to restrict what they're saying or avoid what they're saying or censor what they're saying. If people come into my classroom, for example, and start causing a ruckus and cursing, I'm not going to allow that. I'll see if I can engage in a constructive way, but at a certain point, I'll say, oh, this is not what we're doing here, and I'll remove them. So it can get a little bit tricky to figure out where the line is, and that's something that happened this morning, and I thought, good grist for the mill, good reason to explore it in more detail as a group.
I got a question.
Go for it.
Well, you said that those people who use the curse words are basically don't. Sometimes they don't know that they are harming people by those words. My question is, can you say the same for people who over censor stuff, that they are causing harm because they are restricting speech for others, and it's kind of harmful in a way? So what do you think?
I love that question. I'm going to pass that question over to Shafani if you want, Shafani, because you had a great quote related to that. Do you want to share that? Do you know what I'm referring to?
Question. Could you repeat the question again?
Yeah, sure. As much as he said that people don't know how much damage they inflict by saying stuff, so is it the other way around? Is over censoring can harm people in a way?
I think there were a few quotes that we brought up.
I can tell you the quote that I was thinking was relevant, Shafani, if you want.
Yeah.
A person may cause evil to others, not only by his actions, but by his inaction. And in either case, he is justly accountable to them for the injury. So in other words, by not doing something, you can cause harm. Like as a teacher, as a group leader, if somebody is behaving badly and I don't stop them, then I'm responsible in a way for the harm that they cause.
But wasn't Skogie referring to if you censor someone, you're also causing? Let's say someone is speaking and they get angry and they are causing harm or they are offending someone with their language.
Yeah.
And Skogie, was that you were saying that if someone censors the person, isn't that also harm?
Yeah, but I didn't mention that situation. Any situation.
So thank you,
Shafani.
So I think I want to consider both of these quotes. So let me read the other quote that pertains to what you're saying, Shafani. Here it is. If all mankind minus one person were of one opinion, and only one person were of the contrary opinion, mankind would be no more justified in silencing that one person than he, if he had the power, would be justified in silencing mankind. In other words, if everybody in the world believed one thing and one person in the world had a different belief, silencing one person would be the same as silencing all of mankind. And I think the implication in that is also that it is harmful to silence everybody. And if it's harmful to silence everybody, it's harmful to silence one person. And so I think Mill would support what you're saying, Skogie, that by silencing someone, you can harm, you're causing harm.
I agree that that is the definition of censorship. Like if you look at the history of censoring people, it has caused harm if you silence people. So I think it's an interesting question to strike a balance. How do you strike a balance between okay, allowing everybody to speak, but also you don't want people to be speaking in such a way that everybody's getting feeling damaged by what they're saying. I think there's an interesting balancing act.
Come on up, Stephen. Sajad says, if the target is on the feeling or emotions, it's offense. And if physically hurt someone in a relationship or self-respect or career, then it is harm. Okay. I do want to post something now in the chat.
Personal example.
Say again?
Personal example.
We couldn't hear you. Personal what?
A personal example.
You have a personal example. Go ahead.
Yes, because we are speaking in very technical terms. So if I just make it personal, let's say I'm in a group and someone starts yelling at me on the group and says, calls me names. Let's say they start calling me names. And you're online, you see these messages coming at you. And these are offensive. It's an offense. But it also feels like harmful. It also feels harmful if someone keeps sending you messages that are insulting and name calling. So I'm curious about that. Like, I don't know if others on the stage have that experience where offensive words almost feel like harm, especially when it's on text.
Yeah. Now, I haven't yet extracted it from the book. I posted some comments in the side chat that kind of disagree with what you're saying, Shivani, but I also know that Mill would agree with you that there is certain language that is considered like an attack language that he wouldn't consider protected speech. I have yet to pull up those quotes, but we can continue to inquire. Yeah, just directing invective, curses, and insults at someone does not meet the standard of dialogue. It is both offensive and also disrupts the goal of allowing speech. I think he makes that argument, and I agree with that argument too. And that's what I want to look at. When is it just speech, and when is it something we want to filter out? Vizuka says, abusive language itself is abusive, and the meaning of the first word is a contradiction to statement of tolerated. What is tolerated depends on factors. But abusive, by definition, comes up with a whole different thing, not a form of speech, but a form of abuse. Sacris says, For me, harm causes objective damage and offense causes subjective damage. Emotional or physical, that doesn't really matter. It can be even damage to the reputation or business. So let's look at a concrete example. What if I said, I really don't like you. In fact, I hate you. I hate you completely and utterly. Would that be harmful? Come on up, Tolong.
Saying I hate you is an offense. I mean, it can offend someone. But arguably, if you keep saying it to the person, I hate you, if you say it to someone over a long period of time, I think it can cause real psychological damage.
How would it cause psychological damage?
Saying I hate you to someone repeatedly, if assuming a lot of other factors are also complicit. Let's say you have a relationship with someone, let's say it's a family member, and the family member keeps saying, I hate you, or keeps saying something else that's offensive, you're an idiot, and you say it repeatedly over a long period of time, and I think that, I think it's common sense that that can cause harm to the person mentally. Don't you think?
Well, so you changed something. I said I hate you. You added in you're an idiot, which to me is different. We can look at that too, but I don't want to take that. I don't want to get too lost in the weeds. I want to present another example because you brought up this idea of psychological harm, and I'm not sure what psychological harm means, but here's a case that I want to consider. Somebody wants to date me. Somebody wants to marry me. They really love me. They want to get married with me. And I say, I'm sorry, no, I don't want to marry you. And they get really depressed. Just their life is just consumed. They're just totally miserable. They can't work. They can't eat. They can't have other relationships. I mean, their life, is ruined. Maybe they even kill themselves. Now, it sounds to me like there's some kind of psychological harm happening, some psychological issue. But did I cause that psychological harm by saying no? I don't think so. So I would want to clearly separate out, where the harm is coming from.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And when you said that, I thought actually between two adults and someone says, I hate you, I don't think it can cause harm because the other adult has the freedom to walk away or, or not have to be in that space. So I think I was specifically thinking about a parent-child relationship. Let's say there's a parent and a child, and then the child doesn't have any choice but to be around that language or those ideas. So it's kind of like a situation, or even like a teacher-student, like prolonged exposure where the power dynamics are unequal, and the person who's receiving it feels like they don't have options. So I would say in an unequal balance, if the power is unequal, it's usually a child involved, then I think there's a damaging factor. But if it's two adults, yes, I don't see harm.
So there's a lot there to respond to. I also want to get in some of these comments from the chat. Fazuka says, abusive language typically serves to demean, insult, or belittle others, which contradicts the notion of tolerance, which inherently involves respect, understanding, and acceptance. Let me say that again. Abusive language typically serves to demean, insult, or belittle others, which contradicts the notion of tolerance, which inherently involves respect, understanding, and acceptance. So, Fazuka, does that mean you would consider abusive language harmful? And then what do we mean by abusive language? I'd want to know. Fazuka also says, however, once language crosses into the realm of abuse, it often violates the fundamental principle of treating others with dignity. That opens up a whole bunch of questions for me. There's, I think, many ways to not treat others with dignity. For example, somebody who's very wealthy, they're walking along the street, there's somebody who's homeless. The wealthy person ignores them, doesn't give them any money, doesn't give them any food or help, just says, oh, I don't care. Let them be homeless, die, I don't care. To me, that doesn't seem like treating them with dignity. But have they harmed them? Is that something that we would want to put them in jail for? Oh, you ignored this homeless person, you had money, you harmed them, you denied their dignity in some way, we're putting you in jail.
That's a good point, that you can treat someone devoid, like can deprive someone of dignity. Oh, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. What do you think? Can you deprive someone of dignity without causing them harm?
Now, I invited Hume to this class. Hume is a member of the server who's an expert on these questions. I was really enjoying listening to him talk about some of these ideas yesterday. I'm not going to be able to explain it as well as he did, but I'm going to make an attempt, and we'll see how it goes. He spoke about something called the asymmetry of morals, where we tend to believe that somebody has a responsibility to prevent harm, but not a responsibility to do good. And you can decide this for yourself, but the example that he gave was, there's a mother and she's going to give birth, and she has knowledge that the child is going to want to die. The child is going to live and be miserable and is going to want to, would rather be dead. And he asked, does the mother have a responsibility not to give birth to that child if she knows that he's going to live a miserable life? And then there's a counterpart question, which is, if the mother knows that the child will be happy, does she have a responsibility to have that child and to give birth to the child? And you may have your own take on that, but I think my answer to that was, she does have a responsibility not to give birth to the child, and she does not have, if she knows it's going to be miserable, but she does not have a responsibility to give birth to the child if she knows it's going to be happy. And you may disagree with that. You can let us know what your answers to those two questions are, but that's what is meant by the asymmetry of morals. And there's a lot there, so I don't want to say more about it until I kind of see how that in itself kind of lands in the group.
Hi, everyone.
Chocolate,
Hello.
welcome.
Hi, James. Um, Long time no see. I didn't.
Yeah.
I was not able to join the last two classes, but I was joining in the audience. I heard most of it. I just want to ask a quick question. I didn't hear your answer to the question. Your personal answer. Can
My
you
personal answer is if a woman is going to give birth to a child and she knows that the child is going to have more suffering than a good life, if she knows the child is going to be miserable, then she has a moral duty not to give birth to the child. But if she knows that the child is going to be happy, she does not have an obligation to give birth to the child. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. To some extent, yeah, I guess. Pretty much, I would think the same.
There are a bunch of other comments in the chat. Cassie says, I hate you. Well, some of us will definitely want to know the reason, like maybe there's something wrong with me, or maybe I did something bad. It gets them into a state of overthinking, and this is a psychological harm. Interesting. So telling somebody that I hate them is harmful because they're going to think about it and wonder and think too much about why I hate them. And that generating that state of overthinking in them is the harm that we've caused. Okay. That would lead to, for me, a whole bunch of situations where it would mean that I was harming people, and I don't know how I would get out of it. I mean, people think about things I do. Maybe they don't like it. People come to my classes, for example, and they say, I want you to do this. I want you to teach out of a grammar book. I want you to teach me pronunciation. And I say, I'm sorry, no. And they're not happy. They're in fact, they're very upset that I don't do what they want. Did I harm them? I hope not.
For distinction between hurt and harm. Hurting someone's feelings and harming someone. I wonder if that's an important distinction. Someone's feeling.
Anakin says, I think it depends on the person and how sensitive they are. Now, that sounds okay at first glance, but I would be really careful about that, because if we're looking for a clear definition of harm, like if we want a principle, would you accept the same idea for harm? Like generally, I think we agree that it's harmful to kill somebody. Would we say, well, killing somebody could be bad, but it depends on the person. Somebody might want to be killed. I think generally we're pretty strict about that and say, killing somebody, even if they wanted to be killed, we don't really allow that.
I would say it actually also depends on the way you deliver your response, even if you're not harming the person. Like in your example, specific one, which is when some students come here and they are asking you to teach grammar, pronunciation, and all that. Well, you rejected that and you said, no, I won't do that. And that's okay. But maybe there are sensitive people, if you said it in a way that is somehow not too nice, maybe that would harm them. Like it's about the way you deliver. Maybe no, I'm not teaching
Are you
grammar.
familiar
Are you
with
still?
the eggshell skull doctrine from like theory of law?
No. Let Chocolate finish,
No.
and then will you tell us about it?
That was a response to what Chocolate said, my bad.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
But I was just saying that theoretically, it's not wrong to just say that I'm gonna be doing the thing I want to do. But maybe if someone is asking you and you're in a position of authority and you're gonna be refusing his opinion or his request in a bad way, maybe that's a bad form of language, or maybe this way you hurt him. Even that you're not, like, you don't owe him anything. You do not owe him anything. So it's just about the way. I guess it depends on the way you deliver your message of rejection, even if it's something that you do not owe to someone.
And that does that make it between harm and offense? I mean, I can certainly see that people care about the way a message is delivered, and you could likely not offend somebody by delivering the message in one way, whereas you would offend somebody if you delivered it in another way. But are you saying that depending on how you deliver your message, it could be hurt or offense?
Yes, pretty much.
Okay, I didn't
Yeah.
follow how that could be the case, but I'm curious. And then I just wonder if Radefi, could you say what you had brought in? I didn't catch it.
Well, I just think the entire discussion is a little bit silly. Like, clearly, if you're engaging in tortious behavior, you're going to have liability for the consequences of your action, even if the person that you harmed is like especially sensitive. Like, certainly, it is the case that there is variance in like how sensitive an individual is. But when you hurt someone, if you punch someone, you take responsibility for whatever damage they suffer, even if it is the case that they have an eggshell skull. Doesn't matter that the average person may not have been as harmed, right? You're still equally as responsible. I think most moral philosophers and people who write about ethics would agree with this line of thinking. So I think it's a bit bizarre that we're kind of diverging here. I'm not really sure what the argument is.
Yeah, so you're more of an expert on morals, ethics, and law than people will be here. So I'm glad you're here, can kind of help us clarify some of these ideas. The term that you're using that people are probably not familiar with is eggshell skull. In other words, it's a synonym for being very sensitive. And in addition to that, I thought I like the point you made, which is that you can be offended by being harmed, right? Like if you kill my wife, I'm not only going to be harmed, I'm also going to be angry and offended. But just because I'm angry and offended doesn't mean that there isn't also harm involved. I don't know if you were making that intentionally, but
I don't really get where this distinction is going. Like, I assume what you mean by offended is like you understand that it violates some social norm, it violates some expectation, you feel like you've been slighted, and then hurt is or harmed just means that you actually sustained damages. Like, they're clearly related. But what were you getting at?
I don't know if you're here for the beginning of the discussion where I laid out where this came from, but I'll just lay it out again, which is that
Yeah.
as a teacher, I host spaces and people come into these spaces, and sometimes they say very offensive things. They use curse
Right.
words, or they, kind of verbally attack other people. And sometimes students come to me and say, James, we don't like that. You have a responsibility to get rid of these people, ban them, filter them out, stop this from happening. And so in general, I agree. I'm not just encouraging people to come here, attack each other verbally, and curse, but I'm also partial to this idea that I don't want to just come down on them and say they themselves need to be eliminated. And so I want to give some clearer boundaries about what is acceptable and what would be, acceptable, and people can just be here and be offended by somebody saying something, versus there's actual harm being committed, and I would want to eliminate that completely.
Sure, I mean, there's clearly a moral hazard here, and that if people aren't responsible for their conduct here and can say whatever, That's going to have, it's going to reduce the number of people who want to be in this space and also the quality of those individuals. And so if individuals can say whatever without consequence, then the entire group suffers. So you probably don't want that. But I guess it's kind of like the Nazi bar analogy, which is like the bar owner has to kick out every man that comes into the bar wearing iron crosses and such. Not because that man is individually really bad, but eventually he'll bring his friends and suddenly it'll become a Nazi bar. And so even just small slights can sort of start this snowball effect until an entire space is like radicalized by people who are like taking advantage of it. So I don't know. I mean, I just think there's multiple reasons to have like decorum, to enforce decorum, because I think it allows for like constructive dialogue. I don't know.
What Ridefi just said. I think on the one hand, while it makes sense that on principle everyone speaks freely, but one must also, I think, be aware when you allow absolutely everyone to speak that it also has an impact. It has an impact on the culture of the group. And if perhaps you allow people to speak abusively, then that will propagate through the group and it will make it a space where people don't want to be. So I think it's important to be aware of that impact. So I agree with that.
I mean, sometimes you have these like Discord spaces where they're like, "Oh, we don't want to censor any language. We'll allow people saying the N-word," but then suddenly, the space is only like Nazis because those are the only type of people who want to stay, and it becomes like really toxic. But like I don't. Insofar as this thing, like it seems like some person might get marginal benefit from like being especially hurtful or vitriolic, but everyone else in the group suffers. And if you multiply those numbers, it probably hurts the group more than it helps them. And so you probably should enforce that. I don't know. I think decorum is ubiquitous for good reason.
I like to curse once in a while. And I was in a group the other day and I said in text, go to hell. And they kicked me out. And I thought that that was
I'm
a
sorry.
bit. I said in a group, I said to somebody, go to hell. And they kicked me out of the group for saying go to hell. And I thought that that was a little bit overly strict.
Right. I mean, you have to balance the cost of a false positive with the cost of a false negative. You seem like a high value contributor. It seems like that was a regrettable false positive, but maybe people are also being a bit more sensitive because false negative could be even worse. If you like accidentally let someone in the group and they like disbanded the group because they like sowed division or something. I don't know about your particular instance, but I think different groups have different norms, different like tiers of decorum based on like how formal it is, and maybe it can be unclear like what the actual norm is, and it feels bad if you accidentally violate it. I think people do deserve second chances.
So for people who have never been to my classes, the way that it works is generally I will ask people to say anyone else when they finish. We do a thing called functional subgrouping. It's a technical term for finding people who have a similar idea, experience, feeling, and integrating the differences by asking before we bring in a difference of opinion. This is, for me, an alternative to a debate model, which is sometimes the opposing sides of an argument talk at each other. Instead of opposing sides talking at each other and trying to convince each other, the partisan sides talk to each other in a space where both sides are present. And so we go back and forth, each partisan side talking to each other. It's a little bit technical, but generally what that means is want to hear from everybody, want to find a way to get all voices that want to come in.
Functional subgrouping coming from Azarian's theory of group psychotherapy, I assume.
Yes. Yes.
Gotcha. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I don't want to go on that tangent. Never mind.
You sure? Okay.
No, I was going to dog on group therapy and how it's less efficacious than solo therapy for virtually any indication. But obviously, fiscal constraints might impose it, and so there's nothing wrong with it.
Well, do you see the value in groups ever working together? Because it's not only for group therapy, it can be for like an educational space too. I mean, the goal is learning. I'm not seeking
Yeah,
to,
I agree.
yeah.
But I think they're meaningfully different in that, like, in a classroom setting, you can benefit from your peers. Maybe having like a class size of 5 is better than a class size of 1. I don't know about the data there, but it seems like there are diminishing returns, like especially as you go from like 5 to 30.
I think that group's effort is very useful, especially in the topic we're addressing right now, because the boundaries we are referring to comes from an effort of two people, if not many. The perpetrator is trying to discover the other person's boundaries, and it can be easy because the victim or his friend or wherever, he can't like write a book about the boundaries and it's over. He can't tell all the boundaries using dialogue. So perpetrators have to sometimes overstep those boundaries, and maybe based on the reaction of the other person, he kind of get the gist of the boundaries. So I hear a few examples about in group or in general about people who don't know each other that are strangers. I think it's only natural that if you are dealing with somebody you don't know, that you can overstep their boundaries. And with people you know, they have a level of toleration also that you know their boundaries, so basically won't overstep them on purpose for the fun of it. So I think in general what you were saying, the method we are using can be also useful in kind of trying not to get to offending somebody or harming them.
Googie, when you say the method that we use, are you referring to functional subgrouping?
Yep.
So you're gonna disagree a little bit with Redefi? You're advocating for the value of doing this in a large group. I wonder if you would reflect Redefi first.
I mean, it sounded like what is his name? Sorry.
Scoogie?
Sounded like what Scoogie was saying was that group efforts are essential when establishing boundaries, since they're involved with multiple parties, and I think multiple parties would learn to respect each other's limits through a process of trial, error, and communication. Maybe that's what he said. It was a bit rambly, but like if that is the correct interpretation, and reasonably so, I just don't know if that follows or if that's evidence-based. Because I think what you could do is look at like classroom size data. And I think what you'll find is that like smaller recitations probably do have better outcomes than larger ones. And it probably just is like financial constraint that induces the larger sizes in most cases.
So I don't want to drop your point, Redefi, which is why I'm asking if Scoogie could summarize you, because I think you got Scoogie, but I'm not sure if Scoogie got you. So another thing that I suggest in this space, and it's relevant to the functional subgrouping, is active listening through paraphrasing. So I'm asking Scoogie if Scoogie would see if he's getting your point, Redefi. Would you try that, Scoogie?
Summarizing his actual point right now.
His actual point, yep. It's a little bit tough. Hopefully, Redefi would be willing to work with you.
He's using difficult words.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So I don't know if I didn't get what he said, but what I got from it is basically the part. What I remember is the part about therapy, the method we're using. I think it's a therapy something. I didn't catch it, but
the claim I made was that it seems like smaller recitations have better outcomes than larger recitations. But it probably depends on the subject, depends on the style. There probably is some variance there. But just on average, that probably is the case.
So Redefi and everyone. So this is the challenge of inviting native speakers, especially experts, into the class of second language learners. People are experts on philosophy and law, but they're not experts on talking to second language speakers and learners. And so Rudelphi has this wealth of knowledge, but to get it in is going to be is a little bit of a challenge. So Rudelphi, I hope you'll work with me and work with us just as people work to understand you. You're clear to me, but for us, even though this is an advanced class, it's still going to be a bit of a challenge. So would you work with Scoogie as he tries to understand you just by reframing it?
Yeah, I mean, but the way to do that would be to break the convention. Like I would just ask a sequence of leading questions.
I don't want you to do
Like
that.
Scoogie, Scoogie, you would agree with me that do you know what a recitation is like in college? Like
No.
a class
What's
where
that?
you have like a small number of students. It's much like this class, and you work together in dialogue, and there's a greater sense of like peer-to-peer connection and peer-to-mentor connection than you'd get in a traditional lecture. Like a traditional lecture might have 200 students, but your recitation group might have like 20.
I'm sorry, but sometimes I don't. It's like I can't hear you. You know, like
Oh, maybe I don't know.
yeah.
You would
I
agree
really
that
don't have
like
this-
sometimes smaller
Yeah.
classroom sizes might have benefits, right?
Yeah, I think it's easier to communicate if you have small classes. Yeah.
Okay. And then you would probably imagine that this is largely invariant to the subject. And I can't say that. You would imagine this is probably true for most subjects, right?
Yeah, for most subjects, yeah.
You can't say anything about like English teaching that would be different.
No, I wouldn't argue that.
So then you would conclude, right, that for English teaching, it's probably the case that smaller class sizes have like these benefits that we mentioned earlier, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
but you let me ask you a question just to clarify your point. So, in a much larger class, would you find this method useless, or is there another method that's better?
I mean, it probably just doesn't scale because, like, if you imagine that peer-to-peer connections is like if you have n people, there are n squared connections, and that like quadratic growth probably just doesn't scale well as the class size becomes large. Like 4 people, 16 connections, that's manageable. But 40 people, 1,600 connections, that's certainly not manageable. And it's unlikely that all 1,600 of those connections will like appear in like a 2-hour time span. But I think this class is actually quite small because you only have like 6 people, the speakers, and you just have an audience. Like I don't take any issue with the current setup. It's probably like close to optimal. But just in general, it seems like group psychotherapy is less effective than one-on-one therapy, you know, irrespective of modality, like DBT, CBT, BA, psychodynamic psychotherapy, etc., just across the board more effective. But that's probably the case because for like individual trauma and such, having that like one-on-one complete attention probably matters a lot. Maybe that doesn't matter as much for English teaching. I have no idea.
So, Rudelphi.
Okay, so
yeah, go ahead, Scoogie, if you want. Go ahead.
I want to ask you. I don't see the disagreement here.
I'm trying
my
not to
part.
disagree with people.
Yeah, I mean,
You're doing a great
I didn't
job.
try to disagree.
Scoogie, can you get what he said just now?
Yeah, that this method is more custom or more effective on smaller scale of people, and the more it scales, the more problematic it becomes to communicate with the leader or the teacher, or the one who's have the role, leading role.
Gotcha.
What do you think, Rudelphi?
Wait, James Green, can I ask, like, what is your background? Like, I see you've been teaching English for a long time.
I'm a homeless idiot.
You're a homeless? No, yeah, I can see your home. It's quite snazzy.
What my background is in theoretical linguistics, English teaching, and I currently work as a director of education for a refugee resettlement agency in New York.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. When you say theoretical linguistics, do you mean like the Chomskyan school?
Yes.
Oh, that's pretty lame.
I didn't
There's a
expect
good
you to
paper you
like
should
it.
read. It's called like large language models disprove Chomsky's theories of language or something like that.
Send it to me. I've read a bunch of them, and I don't think that they hold water. But if you have something, send it to me. I'll be happy to.
I don't remember the exact title, but I think the underlying thesis is that, like, actually, I don't know. Do I have permission to go down this path? I don't want to
Yeah,
waste your time.
you can go. I'll let you know if it's disruptive.
Well, it seems like all the linguists, create their taxonomies, they create their terminology, they theorize about these complex interactions, but they've never actually been able to model language very well at all. Just having subject-verb agreement, having pronouns agree is like a PhD dissertation in like classical language modeling. And then the classical linguists like Chomsky like wholeheartedly reject the like statistical fuzzy, language theories. But like simultaneously, the fuzzy statistical language theories are manifesting in large language models, which can do everything that classical linguistics can't. And it's even more surprising because like classical linguists like Chomsky can't even model language at all. Like purely following their theories, you can't make any predictions. They're essentially untestable. They're not that much different from like intelligent design, and that there's like a clear lack of a falsification criterion. And so one might wonder if it's even science what they're doing. It seems like it's a lot of like theory crafting, but it's probably more like humanities than like science. It's much more like philosophy than science. If it's not falsifiable, it's quite bizarre.
Are you saying
it seems like
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go. You go.
Are you saying that the large language models are scientific? Or
well, they generate predictions, right? They can predict the next token, and we can see if that prediction adheres to like our understanding of English, and it does. If you attempt to do language modeling like classical linguistic techniques, you can't. Like, no, it just won't even sound like a human. It's terrible.
Granted,
and it's like Chomskyan rejection of like probabilistic models of language. The idea that language has to be, discrete and precise, and there's no fuzziness about it. Like clearly that isn't the case. And even if it were the case, it doesn't seem like that would be the right way to model it, which would appeal to like a form of numerical methods called relaxation. But that's like way too deep. I'm sorry.
Well, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you laying out some of the arguments for
I'm just yapping. I'm
the
sorry.
large language models. I do still disagree with you. It's beyond the scope of this class to go into it in more depth, but not permanently. But just right now, I think it would. I'll say thank you for the contribution, and let's bookmark it for a theoretical syntax or language discussion.
Well, that's the other part. Like the idea that syntax and semantics are completely discrete is like completely belied by the language model. I'm yapping. Go on.
You don't yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Chocolate.
Yeah, I was just like a little curious about, you've mentioned something about someone who's named Chomsky.
Yeah, no,
I'm a little... Yeah, like what is the main concept, or like in short, like what is like the idea that he's describing, or because I'm a little curious about that, because apparently there's like a conflict about what he's saying.
Dude, my friend actually interviewed Chomsky, which was kind of funny. But he was like a bright CS person that then went into linguistics and then like kind of got off his rocker. But I want to go back to
who are you talking about? Your friend or Chomsky?
Chomsky.
So Chocolate, if you want to, and for anybody who wants to learn more about it, you could start with his seminal paper called Syntactic Structures, which was, brought in the linguistic revolution in the 60s. But yeah, it's beyond the scope of this class to go into what syntax is and what theoretical linguistics is. I love that Rudeffi is coming in with the statistical argument model. It totally clashes with the Chomskyan idea, and maybe that could be the subject of another class.
Okay, cool.
Not to say that I'm stopping anybody from talking about this, but I'm not going to have a one-on-one with Rudeffi.
No, you're like you're like the slave master here. You need to guide the discussion.
Yeah. So if people have an interest in this in some way, absolutely go at it. Like Chocolate, you may have an interest, and you can ask questions of Rudeffi or me if you want. go at it. But my sense is this is a number of levels too high for this class,
Yeah.
and so
Maybe it's too advanced. Yeah.
What do you want to talk about, James Green?
I want to talk about what we were talking about, which is
Ethics.
harm versus offense, and free speech, and where does it make sense to limit behaviors, or that line between freedom and protecting society from harm.
You believe in free speech?
I do believe in free speech. I'm a strong advocate of free speech.
Really, like without exception?
I would go with the exceptions laid out by Mill. So with minor exceptions for threats, incitement of violence,
What about like slander?
slander. Yeah, probably.
What's different about threats and slander from other forms of caustic speech?
I don't know.
How is it the case that you have such confidence or such conviction about this free speech hypothesis, yet you have no confidence about like this delineation?
I don't know.
Isn't that a little bit silly? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. It's totally, you're totally fine, Rodolphe. I'll stop you if I need to. It is silly. You're right. I'm a silly person.
Some people are more silly than others.
No. What's happening? Yeah, that's true. And I'll introduce you to some of them if you want to meet them. But what's happening is that I'm just acknowledging the limits of my ability to be rational. So, do I have beliefs that are not based in evidence that I can spontaneously produce? Absolutely.
Right, but it seems like some people bottom out earlier than others. If you're bottoming out at high level concepts, it seems like you're probably a shallow thinker. You don't really think too deeply. Your worldview is probably not well considered. It seems like other people might bottom out way lower because they've considered it more, or perhaps they're just maybe like the degree to which you can go down this before you have to give up. Maybe that's G loaded. I don't know.
Are you saying that I'm bottoming out very early?
Well, relatively early, sure.
Yeah, maybe I have no reasons to believe what I think.
There's probably like an interesting interaction between like SESG and like depth of reasoning, but I'm not quite sure about it.
Well, what's SESG?
So SES and G are two relevant epidemiological variables that we're going to use in like DID analysis.
What is DID analysis?
Difference in difference. It's like a form of observational study. We're attempting to impute causality by controlling for relevant confounders.
You'll have to walk me through that step by step.
So suppose we wanted to study whether or not vegans are more healthy than non-vegans. We could just look at the simple correlations, right? Maybe on average, the vegan is more healthy than the non-vegan, but perhaps that's explained by the fact that vegans tend to be younger because veganism is a very trendy movement, right? So if we wanted to get closer to the actual causality there, we'd want to control for like age. But maybe controlling for age isn't enough because maybe vegans also tend to be wealthier. So we'd also want to control for wealth, et cetera, et cetera. But we never actually get to like the same level of causal evidence that you'd get from like an experimental design. But like this progressive approach of controlling for co-founders is like one common observational technique. Insofar as like depth of reasoning, it seems like one of these relevant explanatory factors may be G, but it might be confounded by SES, in which case I'm not sure.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question. I hope you won't be offended. Do you, when you talk to people, do you take into account who you're talking to, or do you talk to yourself?
No, I absolutely do. I try to like section the audience into like people based on like relative levels of cognition capability. Um, and I like saying things that are like highly insulting to the lowest tier, but that's only like cognizable to the highest tier, but is otherwise neutral to the mid tier. Those are like the comments I like to make the most.
Would you be open to feedback from me?
Oh, absolutely. What's up?
Okay, so I consider myself a highly intelligent person. And
Yeah,
I also know that I'm not the smartest person. I'm certainly not the smartest person
that's for sure.
in the world, and often not even the smartest person in a room. But when somebody talks to me and I really think like I have no idea what they're talking about, I wonder what's going on. And I usually I have plenty of experiences talking to people, let's say, who just began learning English. They're speaking with one word here or there, and I'm trying to puzzle together their meaning, and I make a go of it as best I can. I don't often have the experience I'm having with you, which is that you're speaking at a level extremely high, right? You're obviously very intelligent, and it's not gibberish. I believe and trust that there is meaning and argumentation behind what you're saying, even if I can't follow it. Now, personally, I'm interested. So I'm in my role as teacher here, I'm willing to kind of go to a certain extent, allow my personal curiosity to kind of see what you're talking about, give people an example of this kind of exchange. I would cut it off after a certain amount of time, but it's within the realm of we can pursue this. But you said a few things. I have absolutely no idea what you said, and I appreciate. I mean, I appreciate that you're here speaking about these ideas freely, directly, and giving me a chance to understand them. Now, I also have a sense that you may be aware that it is beyond the ability of me, let alone anybody here, to know what you're talking about. And yet
Absolutely.
yeah, but yet you talk about it anyway, and I'm curious about what motivates that.
Oh, I mean, one, like again, like you set the pace, you set the direction. If I'm going down a path you don't like, just let me know. I'm happy to rewind. And then two, if you want clarity on any particular thing I said, I'm happy to help you there. But like the general motivation, I don't know. I probably just come from like very critical spaces where technical precision is valued above all else, even if it requires a little bit more explanation. Where you are going to reject convenient simplifications.
Yeah.
I have a background in math, so like you just don't do that.
It's true. I don't do that, and I appreciate that. I mean, I appreciate the ability to be technically precise, as you're obviously able to do. My background is in teaching, and I don't disregard the value of speaking to an audience in a way that makes what we're saying accessible. So, I think that you may be making an error, or by having this knowledge and not the ability to make it accessible. That's maybe
No, I
that.
mean, I agree. There's a difference between like functional excellence and then pedagogical excellence, and clearly, like bridging that gap is somewhat of an art. But if you have any narrow advice or like constructive criticism, I'm really happy to hear it. It sounds like you are pretty good at what you do.
Can I give you feedback?
Absolutely,
Who do you want to give feedback to?
Scooty, you are a rhetorician and a scholar, and I'd love to hear your opinion.
To Daffy, I think it's not about only the hard language; it's also about the connection. I didn't feel engaged to hear you. Sorry, don't get offended, please. It's because I didn't hear yourself in your words. So basically, experiences of yourself about what you were saying. It's just like you're quoting this guy, that guy, and that kind of kept me disengaged a bit. So if I've seen some of Redafi in the words you were speaking, like Redafi felt like this, Redafi thinks like this is that, this is that. I think you're dropping yourself. I'm not saying it's the case, but I feel like you're dropping yourself from the words you are using or the thoughts you are using of these highly intellectual people. But I might be wrong.
You think, Skoogie, you think that he's dropping himself by speaking at a level that's so intellectual that we can't access it?
No, I think he's dropping himself because the stuff he's talking about is like factual. It doesn't serve this self, it serves society in general. So it thinks about rational stuff that are like perfect, you know, like theories where this and that, this is good. You know, like general examples.
Yeah,
I
thank
can't,
you,
like,
Skoogie. That was very erudite. Thank you.
yeah, welcome. Sorry if I offended you.
No, you're good. I really appreciate when constructive criticism is given in a way that's well thought out, and I think it speaks to you caring, Skoogie. I think you're a really smart person, and I appreciate you coming in here and really talking.
Rana is here. Hello.
Hi, Rana.
I wasn't here at the beginning of the class, but I was listening for Redifi and Mr. James for, let's say, more than 10 minutes. I'm really impressed by Redifi, but I would agree with the Skoogie concerning the way of conveying the information. You've already quoted many methods or approach to clarify something, but you used this jargon, I think, language. So you've already read about that, and you have the entire knowledge about it. But I didn't see your touch in your speech. How can you, let's say, rephrase those quotes or those approach in your way to speak it to elaborate it for people like us, let's say, in the layman words?
I mean, I think it's more of an art than a science, but if there's anything in particular that I said that you didn't quite grasp, I would be happy to like explain it in a way that might be understandable.
Thank you. And I have another point, another thing to point out. I don't know why did I had this feeling that it's kind of a competition between you and Mr. James. It's kind of you have this what we call it, this competitor mindset. So it's about like you are in a combat. It is good to debate. Being argumentative is a skill. All of us, we need it. But it's kind of you are seeking some flaws in Mr. James, and I don't know why I had this hunch, and you wanna just defeat him by showcase your knowledge and all these stuff that you knew. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not sure about that.
I think you
can
probably
correct me.
are, but Rana, you would agree that like there clearly is a difference between someone being competitive and someone being combative. And I think the former maybe, the latter certainly not.
And I wanna emphasize something, which is that as a teacher, I maintain the authority of the class, and I welcome people coming here and competing with me. I think you're onto something, Rana, and I want to say that it is the distinction, right, that Radefi is making between combative and competitive is useful for me. I do welcome the competitiveness, and I acknowledge that there are competitions I will lose, and I will lose some competitions with Rudelphi, and I'm okay with that. And it's within the bounds of what I'm doing here. So, actually, I really appreciate Rudelphi being here, demonstrating some higher levels of discourse that we can strive towards.
No, I just thought it was funny that there was like an English class in the server, and I was like, I want to see what this is about. I want to see what they're learning, and I thought it was interesting.
Are
I was
you
curious.
When did you come to the server?
I joined this server 9 days ago.
9 days ago. Okay.
Mhm.
I've been doing weekly classes here for about 2 years, and it's basically the art of conversation. So topics come up really all, across the board. The presence of native speakers here is very minimal. And the presence of expert native speakers here is even much less than that. So you're a kind of unicorn, a rare gem for us to have in our classes. And I really appreciate it. I want to strongly encourage you, when you like to come back and to feel comfortable coming back here. But yeah, as there is a struggle for me to meet you where you're at in your training and your interests and your beliefs, there may also be a struggle on your side to find, meaning in being here. If you're not here to teach English, you may or may not be interested to continue. So yeah, I'll be watching closely. I'll be curious to see what happens if you come back or not. But
Rana's
I mean,
here.
I love talking. I love yapping, so
Mhm.
it's always a good time.
Great. Go ahead, Rana.
Yeah, you've mentioned earlier that it's okay to lose competition. There is no doubt about that, definitely, because sometimes we change our mind maybe due to a lack of information, or maybe due to some ambiguity regarding our perception of one particular idea. But I'd like to, I mean, in this case, I wouldn't argue about that. Maybe there is a lot of things which I ignore about many aspects of let's say a topic. But I'd like to ask Redifi, you have this competitive. I mean, yeah, I would agree with you that it's not about being competitive. It's about being competitive. So, are you into all the subjects, or do you have one particular, let's say, realm or topic that you think that you are weaponized, you are very equipped about it, and you are ready to dispute or to debate about it, but there are some stuff that you shy away from, or you are into everything? It doesn't matter. It's only about interacting with others, and let's say holding the hands of others to introspect maybe, or to see the things from a different angle.
No, I mean, I'd say I'm significantly better at like math or computer science than I would be at virtually any other topic, but probably the other topics cluster close together. I don't know. I'm just like generally curious. I don't know. But also, I don't know. I've been up for like 36 hours, so I'm a little bit delirious. So I'm sorry.
You're good. I'm just gonna put a frame on the class. We have another 15 minutes left. I'm gonna end the class in 15 minutes, and I'm gonna go to a wrap-up round in 10 minutes. So 10 more minutes for open discussion, continuing this, or especially I also like towards the end now to invite in the silent subgroup. So people who have not yet spoken had a chance to come in. I want to encourage you to come in if you can. And I want to also just read some of the comments that have come into the chat. Deep says, I always prefer my surroundings to be speaking in a higher level of English than me, because that's the only way that I can improve. Philip says, not intelligence, but what you train. You can stay in shape with your brain. Competing means wanting to win. Combating means fighting. People fight to win. And Deep says, judging and assuming intentions of redef's contribution is utterly irrelevant according to me. LOL.
I imagine most messages are according to the author.
This is not the rule, actually, because as a clinical researcher here, I found it more interesting to me to listen about new models, like the ideas that what Redifi mentioned, and CSS and CES and G models. This field that I'm interested in, so I have actually sent a friend request to Redify because I want to engage with him more about these models because I'm really interested in data science and as a clinical researcher working on research on patients and interventions and exposures and that kind of data
You
science.
do epidemiology?
Yes, I'm a physician,
Oh my
not yet
gosh,
physician.
like internal medicine or
I'm gonna be a physician just
that's
2 years.
awesome.
I'm still a student.
Wait, which USMLE step are you at?
I'm in Egypt. I'm from Egypt.
Oh, I don't know what system you have. Never mind.
What do you mean? I couldn't get the point.
Oh, in the US, how far are you into med school? It's like which like
Uh-huh.
USMLE step you're on. Step 1, step 2,
Yeah.
etc.
Step one is step two for studying from the first aid, and after that, step three, and doing research position. I know that the pathway there to the United States, but here in Egypt,
Gotcha.
the medical school is 7 years, 5 years undergraduate, theoretical information, and 2 years of internship. After that, you got your license exams to get your license to practice medicine.
Gotcha. But I actually have a quick question. Do you use UpToDate as like a person from Egypt, or is there like a more
Yeah,
localized resource you'll look to?
as you know, it needs subscription, but if there is an opportunity for the developing countries to have access for it for free. But I use Ampos for information too.
Gotcha. I did think it was kind of funny. Like, I was like, oh, I want to learn more about medical Japanese. I'll just find the Japanese equivalent of UpToDate or Dynamed. And then I was like, wait, they just use the English version. That's so cucked. Oh my god. Everyone in the world just reads our references. It's quite sad. I think they have like Chinese translations, but like that's it. I don't know.
Do you mean that we are studying here medicine? We are studying here is in English, not
No,
in my.
I study theoretical mathematics.
Joe, were you asking us if we know that the medical language that you learn is in English in Egypt?
Yeah, almost all over the world, most of the countries studying in Africa, mostly they study medicine in English and the MENA region.
The
I
mean
know some countries like Japan, Syria, China, they study medicine in their native language. But as you know, medicine is a worldwide language. Like if I'm here and I met someone in Europe, in any place, we can understand each other. Terminology that we are using are familiar to each other.
I don't know that. I'm learning that from you.
Hmm. No,
It's quite. I'm quite curious
almost,
about like. Go ahead. Go
Rana
ahead.
is here. Okay.
Go
almost
ahead, one at a
all,
time.
most of the countries study
Joe,
medicine.
finish your thought and then go ahead, Skoogie, and then Rana.
Okay, okay, I have finished my thoughts with Redify, and I showed my thoughts that I was interested in his technical terminology that he was mentioned that he mentioned I'm interested in. So thank you.
Observational technique.
Anyone
You
else?
should. I can send you a textbook on study methods. It's interesting. I don't know.
Um,
Also
I,
on
I
the.
have six
Hmm?
publications. I have six research publications now in very prestigious journals, mathematical reviews, meta-analysis, clinical trials. So I'm interested in this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think finding causality through measurement is like the basis of science. Something like inherently interesting about that. But also, I don't know. Also, Joe, I'm a she/her, but thank you. I'll accept your friend request.
Sorry for that.
I'm just going to read some comments in the chat. Bazzi says, from a class about liberty, I haven't heard a single thing about liberty yet. Cassie says, in a class, whether online or in real life, students are different in levels. Some have high levels, some have low, some have medium. The teacher is required to use a method that is in favor to all levels, and that could help the smart get smarter and the less smart improve a bit. So finding someone who uses such terminology and knowledge is highly appreciable. I encourage people to engage in conversations such as these with people who have higher levels than them in order to improve. It might be difficult, but we are skilled to adapt quickly if we use our potentials and hidden skills. And young bloodsucker says, Mr. James is a cutie pie. And Ridelfi, you were saying something when I read out a comment from the chat earlier. I didn't catch it. You said something like the comment is, what did, if you remember?
The person said, that's my opinion at the end of the comment. And I was commenting that presumably most.
Oh.
I was making a joke. I'm sorry.
No worries. And then, Skoogie, did you want to say something?
Yeah. I want to join Ridefi on the fact that it's kind of disappointing for these countries to drop their sciences and knowledge and to adopt American way. And even like trying to filter it out using their own language, translating it, I think it doesn't serve any purpose. I think it's
the purpose of making things easier to index. Also, like, it's cheaper if you can just like use the same resources. But
it's practical because I think it's superior.
That's why everyone here is probably learning English, right? Because English is the most useful language.
Yeah, I would say that the US is leading in terms of science and technology because it's not genetically justified, but we all know that they kind of try to seduce a lot of people to go there.
Well, I mean, the pattern's changing though. Like, I don't know if you keep up with, I think it's Nature, but I think, or maybe it's I forget, but like, there's like a site that tracks like scientific breakthroughs and citations and impact across countries. And it used to be the case that like 80% of like good research came from the US. But now I think the number is like 60%. And I think it changed over the past like 10 years. And basically all of that difference went to China. So I don't know. I mean, it might just be it might be the day soon where most of the research contribution is not coming from US institutions. That might be changing.
I don't think that day will come soon, since you said that they are still using the American resources. And they do the same thing where they recycle stuff like cars, technologies. They kind of get the blueprints and they try to redo it their way, in a cheaper way, in a much cheaper way, an effective way, so that they can take over the market.
Maybe
in a way, they are trying to fight out. Yeah.
I mean, it seems like the U.S. is becoming less of like a research behemoth, and there's some rising stars in the rest of the world. So I don't know. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think that's interesting.
Talong says, you got to understand what is liberty. I doubt the people here even know the real meaning of it to talk about it. Atroga says, can you guys talk some sense? Tell us what is going on, please. And Tundam says, America is the reason for the brain drain. I know that these kind of come out of, they're not directly related to what you and the two of you were saying, but I'm bringing that in because we're kind of in the sound subgroup arena. And Tolong, you're on the stage. You haven't said anything. Do you want to get in before I go to surprises and learnings?
Sorry.
Welcome. You have a chance to speak if you have anything to say.
Is the audience okay with that?
I'm not.
Okay.
I don't care what the audience wants. I'm doing this
Okay.
on my own as a tyrant.
Well, I wonder like how much freedoms individuals have, like when using technologies, and like why should the regulations come in?
I'm sorry. You're curious about freedom with technology and regulating technology?
Yeah, like what you think is like okay standards for like monitoring some technologies?
It seems people just care about, is it net positive? Like, I don't know. I don't think it's that complicated.
Sorry?
You consider the cost of banning it, that is legitimate uses that you are no longer allowing. Those would be your false positives. And then you consider your false negatives, which are the costs of things that should be banned but wouldn't otherwise be banned if you didn't pass legislation. Those are your pros and your cons, and you're just going to weigh them. And so an argument for a policy is going to be in the form of like, X is a net positive because we considered the pros, we considered the cons, and the pros outweigh the cons. And I think it sounds like a vague and general answer, but you asked a very like vague and general question, right? About like what is the general framework for advancing policy or regulation for technology? And I think the answer is just weigh the pros and the cons and think long term. I don't know.
Thank you, Radefi. I'm going to move now to surprises and learnings. This is the 5 minutes that we use to end the class. It's a reflection time on the time we spent together. There's 6 categories: something you were surprised by, something you learned, a satisfaction, something you liked, dissatisfaction, something you did not like, a discovery, something that was new, and a next move, something you want to do after having participated here today. Anybody have a surprise or learning?
Scooby?
Rana is here.
Scooby, then Rana.
Go.
Okay. So, surprise and appreciation is happens to be a person today, which is Radefi. Welcome here. Hopefully, we can see you next time. Our next move would be me trying to adapt to understand him and being more engaging to listening to him. That's all.
Well, I don't want to go back to the issue about the language, academic language used in our universities, because we have the same issue as Joe. But I'd like to comment on what Deepshit said. Actually, I'm not bothered with the presence of Ridifi. Definitely, I will benefit from his knowledge. However, I have 2 options. Either I will listen to him, just I'm listening to any podcast, or since he is in an English learning class, he could contribute more efficiently to help us by changing, let's say, next time if he'd like to join, let's say the way that he's gonna transmit the information, because we'd like to go, let's say, beyond the usual conversations. But I think for people like me who are learners, to engage with Redifi and others, it's not about native speakers, it's about the subject. So to discuss more loaded topics, I think it requires the modification, let's say, some slight alteration, let's say, on the way of transmitting the information, so we could also participate effectively. And thank you for everything, Mr. James and guys.
Thank you, Rana. Any other surprises, learnings?
I guess I'm surprised at. I should be polite. I think I was surprised that this space even existed. I was just kind of in the server as a meme. I was like, what are the ESL people up to? But I think I learned this is a cool space and there's some people here. I think the next step, though, is to probably never come back again. I'm joking. I don't know, but it was cool talking. I don't know if there are any like pedagogical deficits of what I'm saying. For one, I think I'm coming here for leisure. The fact that my leisure aligns with your like incentive to learn is like a happy coincidence. But I don't think I have any like compunction to align it further, especially if it's at like the expense of my leisure, which comes first. But I don't know. I think you guys are cool. I think the one thing I would do differently though is I'd be more like schizo and narcissistic, and I would force you to use my pronouns.
Say it again.
Like,
You'd be
I
more
can't think of anything
schizo
else.
and what?
Narcissistic.
Narcissistic? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I'd force you. I'd
What
impose my.
what are your pronouns? She, her?
I'm a trans person. Yeah.
Okay. So you'd like to ask people to use your pronouns.
I think that would be my preference. Yeah. But I know that ESL spaces tend to be like far less left-leaning than other spaces. So I feel a little bit weird like imposing that on people from different cultures. I don't know.
You can ask and see what happens, and see what, if you're curious what people's
I mean,
opinions.
I probably have like garnered enough respect to like get that, and it's also like imposed by the TOS, but there probably is like some exchange of social capital there, which is interesting. But I'm just yapping because I'm sleep deprived. It's very interesting.
You're good. It's the end of the class. On that note, I'm going to end. Thank you, Rudelfi. Thank you, everybody on the stage. Thank you for participating in a really interesting conversation. Have a great week. Happy New Year, everybody. And see you next time. Thanks again. Bye for now.
You mean next year?
See you next
Oh,
year.
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy New Year.
Happy
Bye.
New Year. Bye.